So as Richard said, I have a background in journalism. I spent 10 years as a newspaper editor and reporter, and about a year and a half as Richard's boss. And it's a really good lesson. You never know who's going to come back into your life at some point. So treat people really well. You never know. I never would have dreamt when Richard and I worked together at a little newspaper down in Middlebury that I would be working, and today, almost 20 years, at an electric utility. Back then, I could not have imagined anything more boring, more traditional, and more frustrating than working at a big utility that normally is very, very bureaucratic, slow-moving, and often obstinate. I'm curious, before I get going too far, just throw out some adjectives. When you think of utilities, phone companies, electric, cable, what are the things that come to mind? What do you think of? Go ahead, just throw them out.
Just kind of corrupt.
Corrupt? Okay. Monopoly. What else?
Bills.
Bills, yep. All right, well, that's kind of the types of things that would come to mind for me when I thought about utilities 20 years ago. I also thought they were really boring and that they were all about protecting their monopoly. Utilities, as you know, in Vermont, in most places, each one has a monopoly service territory. No one else can really come in there and pick off their customers if they want electrical service unless they want to generate it themselves or get into a net metered system. They're pretty much stuck with whoever the local utility is. And I'll tell you about two different utilities, one I worked for previously and one I work for today. They merged together just over a year ago. And Central Vermont Public Service was the oldest utility in the state. It was the largest utility in the state. It was founded in the early 1900s through the conglomeration of 8 really small, essentially municipal utilities in central Vermont, Rutland, Middlebury area. And it was, in many ways, a great company to work for. I worked for them for 16 years, expected to work there maybe a year or two, get some experience in the lobbying business, which is what I was hired to do, and then get out and move back to Burlington. And that didn't quite happen that way. I ended up still there when the merger of CVPS and GMP happened a year and a half ago, and I went into the new company and now in a totally different part of the business. But CVPS was a very traditional utility. They did a lot of great things, had an amazing storm record for response to storms, for repairs, pretty decent customer service, but not a very innovative company. If you looked at CVPS on the continuum of most innovative and most traditional utilities, we definitely would have been on the more traditional end of that spectrum. And that's where, frankly, most utilities are. They're all about sending a bill every month. They're all about keeping the lights on, but doing it in a way that is as simple as possible, often with as little interaction with their customers as possible, and certainly without a lot of reliance on renewable energy or distributed generation. If you talk to most utilities in the United States, what they think about net metering or solar, those are the banes of their existence. They just don't want to get involved with it. They throw up roadblocks to prevent net metering from happening in their service territories, and they are not helpful at all to those customers where net metering is allowed in getting attached to the system. CV wasn't all the way over there, but we definitely were not on the forefront of things as far as helping customers build solar or wind or anything else and get connected to our system. We followed the rules, we did what we had to do, but we didn't roll out the red carpet. Green Mountain Power, on the other hand, about 5 or 6 years ago, made a decision that they were going to focus on the customer and what the customer wanted, not what the utility might want. And to this day, we still get questions about what the hell are you doing this for? You're cutting your own throat when you help customers get involved in solar and renewables. The customer view at GMP is that if we can make the customer happy, even if that means helping them get off of our system essentially and not buy any power from us, in the end, things will work out for us because we're going to find other ways to serve those customers. So 6 years ago or so, GMP made a proposal to the Vermont Public Service Board to actually pay, on top of net metering fees, to those customers who wanted to put solar on, a 6-cent premium. GMP saw the value of renewables, saw the value of environmental attributes, of helping customers get what they wanted, and economic development of the solar industry in Vermont. And they proposed a big boost to get those customers online and to help develop that industry. At CVPS, we thought they had lost their minds. I remember the conversation directly when we heard about their proposal. They put out a press release at Green Mountain Power, and we literally thought they had lost their minds. They're cutting the sales out, by net metering. They're allowing customers to generate their own electricity and still rely on the grid when they're not generating electricity, but not really paying a whole lot into it because of the payments that go to net metered customers. We literally thought they had lost their minds. GMP, on the other hand, was taking a much longer view of the industry, of the solar industry, and of the customer relationship. So GMP started doing this, started paying a 6-cent premium after they got permission from the Public Service Board. And 3 or 4 years went by, and that proposal that GMP had originally just for itself ultimately became the law of the land. So now in Vermont, all customers who net meter get that 6-cent premium up to a certain level. It varies by utility, but virtually anyone who comes into the system these days, with a few exceptions, can get that premium, and it really has had a huge impact on the number of customers that are coming in and creating electricity for themselves, essentially. GMP and CV merged in June of 2012, so a little over a year and a half ago. And I could tell you from the CV perspective, there were a lot of people at CV who were not thrilled with that. I was one of them. When I found out that GMP was ultimately going to be buying the company, first thing I did was start making calls to headhunters because I wanted to get out. Our cultures were so different, and I thought the CV culture, which was very customer focused in a lot of ways and very focused on good, reliable service, I thought I would not enjoy the GMP model at all. And the GMP model, besides the net metering stuff, is really much quicker moving. The CV model, again, is a very traditional utility. You think things through a lot, you talk a lot, you mull them over for weeks, months, sometimes years. And the GMP model is somebody comes up with an idea and it happens. Things happen very, very quickly. Oftentimes we don't know how they're going to happen, but we make decisions to get things done and then figure out how to get them done after the fact, which for a lot of people in the traditional utility industry is really, really scary. It's throwing out everything that they've known for, in some cases, 20, 30, 40 years. We have employees still in the company who joined the company when they were your age, and they're in their early 60s. So after 40 years, they're still in the business. So GMP, immediately after the merger announcement, said they're going to make Rutland the solar city. And we all at CV, merger hadn't happened yet, said, what the hell does that mean? And if you ask people at GMP, they didn't know what that meant either. It was an idea they had to really develop solar in a big way, but there was no detail around it. There wasn't a plan. No one knew how they were going to make Rutland a solar city or even exactly what that meant. So the merger happened. We started working together. I got promoted from public affairs, which is what I did for the 15 years I was at CVPS. I was basically the spokesman for the company, into the generation side of the business. So now I'm, as Richard said, I'm vice president for generation and energy innovation. So my role is really twofold. One, developing new generation and then operating it once it's built. And two, coming up with new innovations for our customers, for the company, how we can serve customers better. And that has been really fun, really exciting, and completely foreign to what I did in the old world in the traditional CV utility. So we immediately, as soon as the merger happened, started trying to figure out, so what the hell is a solar city? No one had any idea what that really meant, internally or outside. So we developed the idea a little more and came up with a very specific goal. Our goal is to make Rutland, which is a city of 15,000 people, very blue collar, very, compared to much of Vermont, especially compared to Chittenden County, lower income, lower levels of education, higher poverty, you name it. Rutland's got a lot of challenges compared to other parts of the state, although it's got a lot of great advantages. It has people who are really salt of the earth, who really pull together when the chips are down. So we developed a plan to make Rutland the solar capital of New England. And what we meant by that, or our definition of that when we know we got there, would be Rutland would have more reliance on solar energy than any other city in New England. And so we did a lot of research on what other cities are doing in solar, what other utilities are doing in solar. And we quickly learned we had a really big advantage because in most other places in New England, the utilities are throwing roadblocks up to solar development. In some cases, they're building some stuff themselves, but they're not working to collaborate with communities, with developers, with individual customers to make solar happen in a big way. And so that's what we're all about right now in Rutland. That's my primary focus, is to get as much cost-effective solar built as quickly as possible in the city of Rutland, and then we'll expand from there into a much broader area of the state and ultimately statewide. We've been doing it, we said from the beginning, we're not going to do this the way a traditional utility would do it. So far we've only built one 150 kilowatt system ourselves in the year since the merger happened. It's built on an old brownfield, a place where they used to compress coal into gas, a very traditional utility site, contaminated with coal tar and literally sitting on CV's books for the past 60 years without any environmental mitigation to it until just before the merger when it was finally cleaned up by CVPS, and still not appropriate for housing or childcare or parks or whatever, but it's a perfect site for a solar farm. So we built a beautiful little farm there. It's right on the creeks of East Creek, which runs right through the city, and we named it after a bike path that's been built on the opposite side, the Creek Path Solar Farm. So we've built one 150 kW project so far in the city. Big deal, right? So why the heck is Steve up here talking to us? But what we have also done is we've built collaborations with people that a traditional utility would never work with in a million years. Renewable Energy Vermont, first people we really talked to. How could we work with them to get solar built quickly, cost effectively, create jobs, create tax benefits to the city of Rutland, and ultimately create renewable energy in the city. Renewable Energy Vermont, everyone knows what that is, I take it? No? Okay, Renewable Energy Vermont's the state trade association of solar developers, wind developers. Anyone who's in the renewable energy field in Vermont is typically a member of REV. And they're the ones putting on the conference that Richard just talked about that's coming up at the Sheridan in about a week. So that was one of our first calls. We then reached out to the city of Rutland and really talked to Rutland in a way no one's talked to Rutland in a long time. When most people think about Rutland, they think about an old city with a big drug crime and a lot of poverty. That's what you hear about Rutland all the time in the newspapers, on television. Once in a while you hear about a big blood drive they do in December, which, by the way, they're going for a national record December 17th, trying to collect almost 2,000 pints of blood in a city of 15,000 people. Last year they came up 14 pints short of the national record. So it's a great community with a tremendous spirit, but it's also been kicked down a lot. It was a manufacturing hub up until the 40s and 50s when the last big manufacturing businesses left the city of Rutland. And today it's really on the periphery of the tourist industry. It's close to Killington ski area. It's got a beautiful restored theater in downtown, and it's got a big General Electric plant and a large hospital. Beyond that, it's a lot of small businesses that make up the economic core of the community, and it's really challenged to find a new identity for itself. It used to be the marble capital of the world, really, at one time, along with the town of Proctor, which used to be part of the city of Rutland. And it's really been struggling for a long time to create an identity for itself. Is anyone here from Rutland? Yeah, yeah, right here. What do people say about Rutland when you tell them you're from Rutland?
They're like, they call it Rough Vegas.
Yeah.
But kind of like pretty much what you were talking about, but it's really interesting to hear what you guys are trying to do. It's really exciting.
Oh, yeah, yep. Right, right. So we're in south central Vermont, about 20 miles from the New York border. So at GMP, when the merger was announced, CVPS has been there since 1929. It was it was the second or third largest employer after General Electric and the hospital. And frankly, you don't want your electric utility being one of your largest employers. If that's the case, it's showing a lack of manufacturing, a lack of job creation if an infrastructure business is your core. So that said, we were ingratiated into the community. We had been there for a long, long time. We're involved in everything that goes on in the community. Every nonprofit, when people needed money, they turned to us, the hospital, General Electric. Vermont Country Store, which is a little south of there. But we're one of 4 or 5 businesses in that region that really people had to turn to for lack of anywhere else to turn when they need money for whatever, building a new building or supporting some nonprofit effort, food drives, the things like that. So CV was really, really part of the community in a big way. And when it was announced that we were going to potentially merge with Green Mountain Power, the reaction in Rutland was overwhelmingly negative by employees, by the community, by city leaders, by legislators, you name it. No one wanted it to happen because ultimately as we merged, although there wouldn't be any layoffs over time, the number of employees working in Rutland would shrink because we had 2 public relations departments, we had 2 legal departments we had between us. And over time, they would be consolidated as people retired or moved away or whatever, but no layoffs. So GMP made a really smart decision right up front. Not being the typical utility, they were going to take over everything that CV had done, all the blood drives and food drives and corporate donations and things like that. They're going to do all that. But they also reached out to the city leaders and said, we want to help Rutland find a new identity. We want to help Rutland build a new economy. And we want to really change that image of Rut Vegas, which is what a lot of people who even live there refer to the city as. So GMP came up with the Solar Capital Initiative and then ultimately developed it into a really broad vision that's not just about developing the more solar of any city, but really using solar as a really strong economic development tool. And so we have, since the merger, reached out and partnered with not just REV, but dozens of different solar companies. So far, we've convinced 3 different solar companies to move to Rutland and open offices in Rutland. That's 3 businesses more than probably have come to Rutland in the last 5 years, I'm guessing. There might be a 1 or 2, but Rutland has not been drawing businesses for a long, long time. We did that through partnerships, through negotiations, through a vision that really shows these guys they have an opportunity to develop a lot of solar in the area, do it cost effectively, and do it in partnership with the community. We've also committed, and in about 3 weeks, we'll be opening a new Energy Innovation Center in downtown Rutland. Downtown Rutland is about 4 square blocks. It's really small, but in a lot of ways, it's similar to the downtown of Burlington minus the street fair atmosphere. Historic buildings, a lot of really beautiful old buildings, but up until about a year ago, quite a few empty spaces. The occupancy was about 70%, maybe a little higher than that when we announced the merger. And so we made a lot of commitments to the city of Rutland. We made some huge donations to the Downtown Rutland Partnership, which is the organization responsible for marketing downtown. We made large contributions, 6-figure contributions to the Rutland Economic Development Corporation, which is responsible for trying to recruit larger businesses to the area. And we decided that we're going to build this new Energy Innovation Center in Rutland, which is part office complex, part museum about energy. And it's really designed for anyone from 4th grade to adult to get them understanding energy better, making choices about their energy, understanding the implications of their choices depending on what they're using for energy, and tying it all together in a really fun, interesting way. So we could have done that anywhere in the city, but we ultimately decided we were going to buy the biggest rat hole in downtown Rutland that we could find, and that was called the Eastman Building. And it was a 7,700 square foot building that had twice in the last 10 years been flooded, once with 4 feet of sewage, and had been empty for 10 years. The first day I went in it, trees that were growing on the roof were coming through the ceiling on the 2nd floor. It had literally just been shuttered after the 2nd flood, and the owner, which was in New York, I don't think he could have found that building if his life had depended on it. He was totally disengaged from the community and totally disinterested in the property as far as we could tell. So we bought that building, and as I said, in about 3 weeks we'll be opening it. It's going to be by far the coolest building in Rutland when it's all finished. It's almost done right now, and we think it will be a huge draw to downtown. It already has been in a lot of ways. Since we announced the construction of that building, we enticed Small Dog Electronics, which you probably are familiar with, to open an office just around the corner from us in Rutland. They wouldn't be there if it weren't for us pledging to buy all of our equipment for our new building from them. Another solar company, a little small solar company that we've done a lot of business with, we've hired to do a lot of small projects, going forward. They opened a second store called Same Sun Choice of Vermont, and it's a cool, really cool business model. I don't think they've sold 10 cents worth of stuff yet, even though they've been open for 4 months. But they're doing it not to sell products in their store, they're doing it to promote their other business, which is solar installations. So Same Sun Choice, everything in their building is made by somebody who relies on solar energy to run their business. So King Arthur Flour, which is on the west side or east side of Vermont, has a huge solar installation. So they sell their flour and their cookbooks. They sell wine from a vineyard in California that runs on solar electricity. They only have about 10 products. They're only open a few hours a week, but it's built a tremendous amount of interest in people seeing it and like, what the heck is that? And they look, read the sign in the store. Next thing you know, they're calling Same Sun the normal business and ordering a 10 kilowatt net metered solar system. So it's a really cool business model. We have several solar businesses, as I said, are already coming to the city. They've made commitments. They publicly, a couple of them already opened offices. Within the next year, I expect there'll be 5 or 6 more solar businesses operating in Rutland, a higher concentration of solar businesses in about a 5-block square area than anywhere in Vermont, probably, and probably anywhere in the United States in such a small contained area. All of that is having a huge impact on how other people in the downtown are looking at themselves. I've had conversations with at least 24 people who are desperate to get within a block of our building. They want to be close to where we are. And so as a result of what we've started, even though we haven't even opened our doors yet, the occupancy rate in Rutland has gone from around 70% on the ground floor to over 90%. And my bet is by this time next year, you won't be able to find a downstairs storefront property in Rutland that's available. That's our goal, and that's what we think we'll get to in the next 11 months or 12 months. So bottom line, we've done this not thinking like a utility. We're constantly thinking about what does a customer want? And it's a really innovative way for a utility to think. When you think about innovation, I sent around a couple stories for y'all to read, and I don't know how many people read them, but one of the things that really strikes us about innovation is what was the central theme of one of those 2 stories. And that is real innovation that customers are going to care about and that's going to be of value to them is not about giant, huge landscape changes. It's about incremental changes that change how they can do something or how they can feel about something. So everybody in this room's got a phone, right? Everyone's got a mobile phone. What's the difference between Apple and anyone else? There's really little differences when you really get right down to it. But they've made incremental changes that seem big at the time and have really opened up the way people think about their phones. So now, when you talk about a smartphone, most people are talking about an iPod or an iPhone rather than any other brand. That's the kind of changes that we're thinking about. When people are thinking about smartphones from the manufacturing side, they're constantly coming up with little tiny tweaks. What will make it easier? What will make it faster? What will make it more, nicer to look at? And all of that is driven by the customer experience. What little thing on my existing phone could I make better that would help the customer a little bit? So from a utility perspective, we're trying to do the same thing. And we're trying to not look at it from a traditional utility perspective, but from the customer perspective, going back to the beginning of this conversation. So in the utility world, again, traditionally, send a bill every month, keep the lights on, put them back on when they fail. That's the model for 99% of the utilities in the United States. Our vision is completely different. Our vision is to let everyone who wants solar get it, anyone who wants wind get it and attach to our system and use our grid. But we also want to be the one who heats your home, who powers your car, who does things that today we can't even envision, but that we will in the near future. And a lot of it is talking to customers and seeing what's the problems in their lives. So over the last year, we've spent a lot of time thinking about what could we do to help customers with their other utility businesses, their other utility needs. And one of the big drivers for Vermonters, you guys don't have to worry about this unless you're in an apartment that you pay for heat, but paying for heat in Vermont is a huge, huge burden for a lot of people. Typical electric bill might be $100. Heating bill for 4 or 5 months could be $3,000 for a lot of Vermonters. That's a huge difference for just a short period of time. So we've been working right now on a pilot program that we got permission from the Public Service Board to offer that we think will radically change the way Vermonters heat their homes in the next 10 years. We started with a really simple concept. Think about your refrigerator. What does a refrigerator do? Takes heat out of a cold box and dumps it out into the rest of the house. That's it in a nutshell. That's the function of a refrigerator. We're trying to do the same thing. Take heat out of what people perceive to be cold air outdoors, take the heat out of that cold air and put it into the home through a condenser. So we're using air source heat pumps in this pilot program. We have almost 200 customers signed in so far. We hope to get to 300 or so by next winter. And our initial research has proven and shown to us that this thing could go statewide and dramatically change the way Vermonters heat their homes. And this is anecdotal, so don't take it to the bank that everyone's going to have similar savings. But one of my coworkers, a guy named Bruce Bentley, who was the brains behind this idea, heated his house last winter. He used 18 gallons of oil and paid $600 for electricity to run his heat pump. 2,200 square feet of house, and he kept his house as comfortable as anybody else. And he air conditioned his home with the same unit, with the same heat pump unit, by just having it work in reverse during the summer. When we came up with the idea of marketing this to customers, the initial reaction from everyone we talked to is, utilities can't get into that business. How would you sell it? How would you do it? So what we came up with is a straight lease. We buy it, we install it in the customer's home, and we finance it on their electric bill. So they're just paying it on their electric bill. Very simple, very clean, and so far it's working really, really well. Right now we're looking at the Nest. Does anyone know what the Nest is? The Nest is a programmable thermostat that actually programs itself after a while. It figures out when you're coming and going. It figures out what you like the temperature to be, and it ultimately, after a period of time, will start setting the house to the temperatures, and it knows when you come and go. Literally, it knows when you've come and gone. And it will start, it's a little creepy. I can see that. It's a little creepy at first, but it really is amazing what it can do for reducing somebody's heating bill. Again, we're trying to find ways that we can take ourselves out of the traditional utility model, because 20 years from now, there may not be a traditional utility model. It could be completely eaten up by people developing their own energy, whether it's solar, wind, who knows what, in the years ahead. One of the driving things for us right now is trying to figure out what our customers need or want but don't know they need or want yet. It sounds really weird, but that's a big focus for people in my team. Literally trying to figure out and anticipate what is a customer, what's a traditional business customer or a traditional residential customer going to be looking for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road. And we're trying to pilot those things right now. So we're as a small, we're either the smallest or second smallest investor-owned utility in the United States. As a really small company, we're way ahead of the pack in looking at storage, energy storage, Stirling engines. There's a whole bunch of different things that we're studying right now that we think could play a huge role. And maybe some of them won't play any role down the road. But we're really spending a lot of time trying to get into the customer's head and think about what their needs are going to be down the road so we can anticipate them even before, in some cases, they raise their hand and say, you know, it'd be great if you did this. Heat pumps was a perfect example. When we got permission from our regulators to go out with heat pumps, there was virtually no discussion of heat pumps in Vermont prior to that. There literally were probably a few dozen people in the state that had a heat pump in their home. And I'm not talking ground source, because there are some of those. You see ads for well companies doing ground source heat pumps all the time, which are dramatically more expensive. But there was nobody doing this on any kind of real functional basis and real standardized basis. When we put out a really simple press release announcing this pilot program, and in 4 days got over 600 calls from customers who wanted to be in the pilot. We tapped into something that we didn't even know existed, and the customers didn't know existed. No one was clamoring for heat pumps, but once they heard about them, people were dying to get into the pilot program and see if it would work for them. So we've already, in our heads, made the conclusion that this project is going to work. We've done a few dozen installations so far and have completed a couple hundred home visits. And we think that this thing has enormous potential, not only for our customers, but for Vermont's environment and ultimately much broader environment. If we can move off oil, move off fossil fuels, it's going to have a huge impact for Vermont. And right now, Vermont, the predominant heat source for most Vermonters is #2 heating oil, which is coming from drilled wells and both in the United States, Canada, and the Middle East. Not necessarily the cleanest thing on earth you can burn, but in Vermont, the most cost effective for most customers because they don't have access to natural gas. They can't burn wood because of age or infirmity or whatever. There's a million reasons why people rely on fossils, but most of it's convenience. So that's where we're going right now. That's what we're trying to do. I don't know what ages are in here, probably 18 to 30, I'm guessing, just looking around, maybe a little higher. What is it that you guys want out of a utility? Anything?
I want to be able to install enough solar so as to never pay for electricity. Basically, yeah.
Yeah. You can do that right now. The thing, there's two ways to do it. You can do a net meter project in Vermont, or you can just literally build and not be part of the grid. Right.
Why don't we just pause a minute and
Sure.
say what the net metering is?
Okay, sure. Net metering is essentially a system that allows you as a customer to build generation, use it when it's producing for you.
So
And if
generation is your own little power plant, which could be a solar, or
could be a wind farm, could be a biomass plant. I mean, theoretically, that's not very likely, but
a river,
your own little stream, or even a small outflow from your wellhead if you had excess water running out of your well. And through the system, you rely on it when it's producing. When it's not, you're attached to the grid, and the grid feeds you. And at GMP and at most utilities now in Vermont at least, if you produce excess power, and you typically design this thing to meet roughly your annual consumption so that you're essentially producing about as much as you consume. They're never going to match up time-wise, but so the goal is to take people out of the mix, help us reduce peak loads. Hot summer days are when solar's producing the most, so it's actually valuable to us. We see it as a real attribute and a real benefit to our system if we can reduce how much energy we're buying on the peak hot summer days. Prices in New England can go from 4 cents a kilowatt hour to $1 a kilowatt hour, just like that, if a major generator goes offline or if demand spikes really, really quickly. So we don't ever want to be in the market buying in those days. There's a whole system of true-ups, so at the end of the year, you can get payments back if you produced more than you used. You can bank them, and then if other months you use more than you produce, you can get credit for it. You can use us as a bank, essentially.
And to prevent you guys making your own major utilities, you're only allowed to do that up to a certain amount, right?
Right. There's certain limits to the size as an individual, although you can do what's called group net metering and build a much bigger project. If you and 5 friends want to get in on one net metered system, it might be built at your house, but we credit you and 4 other friends, or however many you designate. We've just done a thing with a group called NRG Residential Solar. They're part of the largest solar developer in the United States. We've just done a really neat program with them in Rutland where we worked with them to recruit customers. They're going to build a centralized solar project, 150 kilowatt project in the city of Rutland, and 50 customers will get the output from that. And those customers are signing up to lease a portion, 1/50th of the project each, and they each will be credited 1/50th of the output every month on their electric bill. And again, this is something that most utilities would never do in a million years. We're essentially telling these 50 customers, you don't need us. There's NRG. They're going to cut you a deal that's going to save you, on average $5 or $6 a month. No one's going to get rich off of it, but it means we're not going to be selling electrons to those customers.
Does that help, Nathan? Wherever you are? Yeah, so Green Mountain Power is saying yes. You still have to go out and find the money to pay for the system.
Right. In some cases, but like in that model, you don't have to put up any money at all. NRG is going to build the system for you. they're going to lease you a portion of it, and your net savings, even though you're paying for the lease, the credits you're going to get on your electric bill will be higher than what you're paying them for the lease, so it's a net savings to you.